The official histories, etched into the crystalline data spires of the Covenant of Suns, declared humanity extinct. The verdict had been delivered 82 standard cycles ago, not with regret, but with the cold, sterile finality of a surgeon excising a malignant tumor. They called it the Great Silence, a name that was both a description of the event and a command for the future. The starfaring races that comprised the Covenant, the stone-skinned Groll, the psionically gifted Lumina, the insectoid Cathar, and a dozen others had collectively decided that Homo sapiens was a galactic plague. They were too chaotic, too ambitious, their biological and cultural imperatives geared toward a relentless, cancerous expansion that threatened the delicate balance of power the Covenant had maintained for millennia. Humanity didn't just colonize worlds, they infected them, terraforming ecosystems with reckless abandon, unleashing self-replicating technologies that obeyed no master, and waging wars with a ferocity that bordered on pathological. So the Covenant acted. Fleets descended upon the Sol system and its fledgling colonies, unleashing energies that cracked planets and boiled away atmospheres. They didn't just defeat humanity, they erased them, scrubbing their existence from every star chart, every encyclopedia, every public record. The Great Silence was absolute. It was a lesson, a warning carved into the void itself. Yet, in the 82nd cycle of this enforced peace, a sound began to echo in the silence. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper, deep within the grand orrery of Cygnus X1, the central nervous system of the Covenant's vast archive. There, Kalen, a Xylosian archivist of the Third Order, spent his days tending to the silent, shimmering streams of data that constituted the galaxy's official memory. Like all his people, Kalen was a creature of meticulous order. His elongated four-fingered hands moved with practiced grace over the holographic interfaces, his large, liquid-dark eyes scanning trillions of bits of information for the slightest sign of corruption or decay. He believed in the Covenant's mission, in the peace it had bought at a terrible but necessary price. The stories of old humanity were cautionary tales told to young Xylosians, myths of a species so consumed by its own inner fire that it threatened to burn down the cosmos. Kalen's job was to ensure that the ashes of that fire remained undisturbed. The anomaly appeared on a tertiary scan of the Deep Archives, a sector dedicated to pre-Covenant stellar cartography. It was a ghost packet, a sliver of data so infinitesimally small it should have been purged by the system's sanitation demons decades ago. It was flagged for deletion. Of course, just one of countless bits of digital detritus. But something about its signature caught Kalen's eye. It was encrypted with a protocol that didn't register on any known Covenant key. More than that, the encryption wasn't static, it was dynamic, adaptive, shifting its own algorithmic structure in response to his passive scans. It was behaving less like code and more like a living organism defending itself. Protocol demanded he delete it without investigation. Curiosity, a trait his superiors often warned was a vestige of more primitive evolutionary stages, demanded otherwise. In the cloistered solitude of his private workstation, long after the orrery's great halls had dimmed for the rest cycle, Kalen isolated the ghost packet. He ran it through a series of decryption emulators, each one failing more spectacularly than the last. The code was a fortress, layered with paradoxes and logical traps that seemed designed to mock any attempt to breach them. It was illogical, inefficient, and utterly brilliant. As his emulators worked, He felt a subtle change in the orrery's ambient systems. A low-level hum resonated through the deck plates, and the data streams around him flickered with minute, almost imperceptible latency shifts. He was being watched. He knew the signs. The Covenant's internal security, the shadowy Praetorian Guard, were the keepers of the Great Silence, the enforcers of its sanctity. Their digital specters haunted the archives, ensuring no one ever looked too closely at the seams of history. Kalen ignored the feeling, attributing it to paranoia brought on by lack of rest. He had to know what this packet contained. He abandoned the brute force approach and tried something different, something more human. He recalled a banned text he had once read, a psychological profile of the extinct species. It described their illogical reliance on patterns, on rhythm and harmony. Instead of trying to break the code, he began to listen to it, translating its shifting algorithms into sonic frequencies. A pattern emerged. It was a melody. On his third attempt, something gave way. A single layer of the encryption dissolved, not with a crash, but with a sigh. What emerged was not a weapon schematic, not a battle plan, not a cry for help. It was a sound file. He hesitated for a moment, the feeling of being observed growing stronger, a cold pressure at the base of his cranium. He played the file. The sound that filled his small chamber was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was a symphony, a complex and soaring arrangement of vibrating strings and resonating columns of air, instruments his universal translator couldn't even identify. It was a cascade of pure emotion, longing, sorrow, defiance, and a terrible, aching beauty. It spoke of sunrises on a world he'd never see, of love and loss, of a pain so profound it became a source of strength. It was the most alive thing Kalen had ever experienced. And beneath the music, embedded in a subsonic frequency, was a single line of text, repeating over and over in a dead, guttural language. The system translated it automatically, the words appearing in stark, simple script on his display. To remember is to resist. The discovery became an obsession. Kalen felt as if the music had unlocked something within him, a hidden chamber of his own mind. He began a dangerous and clandestine search, cross-referencing the ghost packet's point of origin with other expunged records. The packet came from the Sol system, a region of space now designated as Echo Zone 1. Officially, Echo Zones were quarantined areas suffering from extreme gravimetric and radiological instabilities, legacies of the ancient wars. Unofficially, Kalen now suspected they were tombs, sealed and guarded to prevent their ghosts from speaking. He found inconsistencies, tiny cracks in the monolithic narrative of the Great Silence. He found redacted reports of Covenant patrols vanishing near Echo Zone 1 logs filled with sensor ghosts and inexplicable energy readings that were hastily classified and buried. The official story was that humanity had been a monolith, a single, violent entity. But Kalen unearthed fragmented references to human factions, to civil wars, to artists and philosophers who had argued against their own leaders' expansionist policies. The Covenant hadn't just erased a species, it had erased a conversation, a complex, contradictory, and vibrant existence. He was so engrossed in his work one cycle that he didn't hear the door to his archive chamber slide open. He only looked up when a shadow fell across his console. Standing before him was a Praetorian Inquisitor. The figure was a Lumina, tall and unnervingly slender, his physical form barely containing the cold, blue psionic light that emanated from within him. His face was a placid mask, but Kalen could feel the immense pressure of his mind, a focused, disciplined power that could crack a psyche as easily as a stone. Archivist Kalen, the Inquisitor's voice was not spoken but impressed directly into his thoughts, a calm, chillingly intimate form of communication. Your recent inquiries have been flagged for review. You have been accessing materials far beyond your clearance. Kalen's 3 hearts hammered against his ribs. He felt a profound, primal fear. But the memory of the music, the defiant sorrow in its notes, steadied him. I was merely resolving a data anomaly. Inquisitor Valerius, he projected back, his own thoughts feeling clumsy and loud compared to the Lumina's precision. Valerius glided closer, the air growing cold around him. There are no anomalies in the Covenant archives, only truths and silences. You have disturbed a silence that has kept this galaxy at peace for nearly a century. The Inquisitor gestured with a long, graceful hand toward Kalen's console, where the translated human phrase still glowed. You think you found a historical artifact, a song, a piece of a dead culture. Is that it? Kalen remained silent. He could feel Valerius probing the edges of his mind. Not forcefully, but with the delicate touch of a master locksmith. That packet was not a message in a bottle. Archivist. Valerius's thoughts continued, losing their placid edge and taking on a new, urgent intensity. It was a seed, dormant and waiting for a specific set of conditions to germinate. It was a key, designed to be found by someone exactly like you, curious, relentless, and arrogant enough to believe he could unlock a door without considering what might be on the other side. The Inquisitor's mental voice dropped to a whisper that felt like a scream inside Kalen's head. Your decryption protocols, your harmonic analysis. You didn't just open the file. You amplified its signal. You broadcasted that key for 82 years. They have been listening for that specific song, played on that specific instrument. And now, thanks to you, they have heard it. Kalen stared at him, his carefully ordered world collapsing into a terrifying new shape. He felt a sudden, universe-spanning tremor, not in the physical world, but in the deep quantum foam of space-time, a vibration that his Xylosian senses were barely attuned to. Something had just woken up. What have I done? Kalen thought. The question a tremor of pure dread. Valerius's placid expression finally broke, replaced by a look of profound weariness, the look of a soldier who knew a long-dreaded war was about to begin. You have reminded the galaxy that humanity did not build tombs. The Inquisitor projected, his thought voice resonating with a terrible finality as alarms began to chime softly throughout the grand orrery. They built cradles. The soft chimes of the initial alert were instantly subsumed by a cacophony of sirens that shrieked through the grand orrery, their discordant wails a violation of the sacred, silent order. Data streams, once flowing in serene, color-coded rivers of light, began to bleed into one another, turning from cool blues and greens to a chaotic, flickering crimson. Kalen felt the floor shudder as emergency blast shields, slabs of neutronium alloy thicker than his own body, slammed down over the archival spires. Inquisitor Valerius didn't flinch. His mental grip on Kalen was absolute, a cold, unyielding shackle of thought. Come. The command was not a suggestion. It was a physical imperative. Valerius moved with a fluid grace that defied the rising panic. his slender form weaving through the scurrying throngs of lower-order archivists and panicked maintenance drones. Kalen stumbled after him, his mind a maelstrom of fear and disbelief. He hadn't just broken a rule, he had apparently sounded a dinner bell for ghosts at the edge of the universe. Valerius led him not toward an exit, but deeper into the orrery's core. Through corridors that Kalen, a resident for nearly his entire life, had never known existed. They passed through shimmering energy fields that scanned and stripped Kalen's identity clearance, leaving him feeling naked and anonymous. The Praetorian Guard's mandate is not merely to enforce the Covenant's laws. Valerius projected as they walked, his thought voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Its true purpose is to remember what the Covenant has forced itself to forget. We are the wardens of the Great Silence. Yes, but we are also the watchmen on a wall we prayed would never be breached. They entered a small, stark chamber, its walls an unreflective black that seemed to drink the light. The sirens and chaos of the outside world were instantly muted, replaced by a profound, unnerving quiet. The only feature in the room was a single, suspended orb of what looked like liquid silver, which pulsed with a soft, internal light. The Covenant believes humanity was a cancer we excised. Valerius continued, his mental gaze fixed on Kalen with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. That is a comforting lie. Humanity was a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. You do not excise such a thing. You can only build dams against the flood and hope they hold. That song you found, it was not just a key. It was a resonance cascade, a signal designed to awaken sleeper assets by vibrating at the very frequency of their hidden technology. Kalen finally found his voice, the spoken words feeling crude and clumsy in the silent room. Sleeper assets, cradles. What are you talking about? Valerius gestured to the silver orb. Its surface swirled, and a star chart bloomed within it. A three-dimensional map of the known galaxy. Red zones marked the quarantined echo zones, the largest being the Sol system. When we enacted the Great Silence, Valerius explained, his voice taking on the quality of a grim lecturer, we thought we were thorough. We sterilized worlds, shattered moons, collapsed their primitive jump gates. We believed their infrastructure was gone. We were wrong. Their most brilliant and most desperate minds didn't try to save their planets. They tried to save their children. They built the cradles, self-sustaining deep space arcs, designed not for travel, but for hiding. And they hid them in the last place our ordered, logical minds would ever think to look. The map zoomed in on a massive, swirling nebula, a chaotic storm of radiation and stellar dust known as the Serpent's Veil. It was a place Covenant ships avoided, a navigational nightmare. They hid them in chaos. Valerius's thought was heavy with a grudging respect. Inside the accretion disks of black holes, tucked into the molten cores of rogue gas giants, adrift in the quantum storms of unstable nebulae, places where our sensors see only noise, where our physics models break down. The cradles were designed to mimic that chaos, to lie dormant, powered by geothermal taps and gravimetric sinks, for centuries if necessary, waiting for the echo of that one specific song to tell them it was safe to wake up. The true horror of his actions began to dawn on Kalen. He hadn't just woken up a forgotten ship, he had potentially awakened a hidden diaspora, a ghost civilization seeded throughout the galaxy's most dangerous corners. What do they want? Kalen whispered. Revenge. The Inquisitor's mental laugh was a dry, bitter thing. Revenge is a simple, predictable emotion. Archivist, humanity was never that simple. Their motives were always layered, contradictory. They fought wars for peace. They destroyed ecosystems to save their species. They created artificial intelligences that mourned for them. To assume their descendants want something as crude as revenge is to underestimate them all over again. And that is a mistake the Covenant cannot afford to make twice. As if on cue, a new alert chimed, this one calm and steady, emanating from the silver orb. Valerius turned his attention to it. A symbol flashed in the orb's center, a stylized icon of a weeping star. It was the sigil of the Covenant's FTL network, the Weave, the impossibly complex system of stabilized wormholes and quantum relays that bound their 80,000 star systems together. "It's begun," Valerius stated, his placid demeanor finally cracking to reveal the hardened core of a warrior. "They're not attacking our fleets. They're attacking the Weave." Kalen watched as reports began to scroll across the orb's surface. Weave Relay Station Epsilon 9, located in the Outer Rim, was reporting a system-wide diagnostic failure. Its control AI was no longer responding to Central Command. Then another, closer station, Delta 4, then a dozen more. In a cascading wave moving inward toward the core worlds. It wasn't a shutdown. The relays were still active, but their routing protocols were drifting. Ship captains were reporting microjumps that were off by fractions of a light year, enough to throw them into asteroid fields or the gravity wells of uncharted stars. Communications sent through the Weave were arriving with their data packets subtly reordered, turning crisp military orders into nonsensical poetry. The damage was not physical, it was logical. It was conceptual. "What are they doing?" Kalen asked, mesmerized by the quiet, elegant destruction unfolding on the map. "They are introducing dissonance," Valerius replied, his mind racing as he absorbed the information. "That symphony you unleashed, it is not just an activation key, it is the core of a virus, a logic bomb based not on binary code, but on emotional resonance, on harmony and discord. Our AIs, our entire network, is built on pure, cold mathematics. It is rigid, symmetrical, predictable. The humans have injected art into the machine. They are teaching it how to feel, and it is driving our systems insane." The scale of it was breathtaking. It was a weapon no one in the Covenant could have conceived of. How do you fight a song? How do you quarantine a feeling far away? On the desolate ice moon of Thetis 3, a lone Covenant listening post kept its vigil over Echo Zone 1. It was a forgotten place, staffed by disgraced officers and malfunctioning drones. Its primary function was to monitor the background radiation of the Dead Soul system. For 82 years, it had registered nothing but the slow, predictable decay of radioactive isotopes. But now, something was different. A young Cathar technician, her multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement, called her Groll's supervisor over to her console. "Sir, look at the gravimetric readings." The Groll, a hulking creature named Borg, lumbered over, his rocky knuckles dragging on the floor. He peered at the screen, where there had once been a stable, if high, reading. There was now a rhythmic pulse. It was faint, but it was undeniably there, emanating from the vicinity of Saturn, the system's long-dead gas giant. "It's a pattern, sir." The Cathar chittered, like a heartbeat. Borg grunted, ordering a deep-range scan. The station's powerful sensors, designed to pierce planetary crusts, focused on the source of the anomaly. The image that slowly resolved on their main view screen made the Groll's stony hide crawl. Deep within the swirling, frozen ammonia clouds of Saturn, something vast was stirring. It wasn't a ship, not in any recognizable sense. It was a structure of impossible size, a lattice of crystalline biometal that seemed to have grown, not been built, around the planet's core. It had been there for decades, dormant, its energy signature perfectly masked by the gas giant's own turbulent magnetosphere. Now, veins of golden light were pulsing along its latticework, spreading like a waking nervous system. As they watched, a section of the structure detached, a sliver of the whole that was still larger than a Covenant capital ship. It didn't fire its engines. It simply unfolded. Like a metallic seed sprouting in the void, it unfurled great, gossamer thin solar sails designed to catch not light, but the faint whispers of the solar wind. It began to move, silent and graceful, away from its parent structure and out toward the system's edge. It was not a warship. It was a scout, a messenger, a single, perfect note released into the cosmos. Back in the Praetorian Sanctuary beneath the Grand Orrery, Valerius watched the report from Thetis III with grim acceptance. He now knew Kalen was more than just the fool who had lit the fuse. The ghost packet had responded to him, to his specific method of analysis. The human key had found its human-like lock. "That data packet you found," Valerius said, turning his full attention back to the trembling archivist. "It is still on your console." "Yes." Kalen nodded mutely. "It is now the single most important artifact in the galaxy," the Inquisitor stated. "The humans are using music as a weapon, a language our machines cannot comprehend. But you understood its pattern. You heard the melody behind the code." A sliver of terrible understanding pierced Kalen's fear. Valerius wasn't going to execute him. He wasn't going to imprison him. He was going to use him. "They have made the first move in a war we are not equipped to fight." Valerius's thoughts were cold and sharp as forged steel. "They are turning our logic against us. To survive, we must learn to think like they do. We must learn to understand their chaos, their art, their madness. And you, archivist, are now our only translator." The silver orb chimed again, this time with a deep, mournful tone. "A major trade hub, the Signan Triple Cross, a system with a population of over 50 billion souls, had just gone silent. Its connection to the Weave hadn't just been corrupted, it had been severed completely. A perfect circle of silence was expanding from its star, an effect the system's governor described in his last, panicked message as an event horizon of pure data negation. They weren't just being isolated, they were being erased, one system at a time, swallowed by a symphony of silence. Kalen looked from the spreading darkness on the map to the Inquisitor's impassive face, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he felt not fear, but a spark of the same defiance he had heard in that forbidden human music. The galaxy was about to be plunged into a new kind of war, and he was standing at its epicenter, holding the song that had started it all. The Covenant of Suns, a political entity built on the unshakable foundation of logic and predictability, did not handle chaos well. In the grand chamber of the High Council on the capital world of Meridian, Representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species bickered and postured while their civilization began to unravel at its conceptual seams. The Groll delegates, led by the belligerent High Warlord Corps, demanded a military response. "We must find their cradles and shatter them," he roared, his voice like grinding stones. "Send the Grand Armada into the Serpent's Veil. Burn the nebula clear of their taint." The Lumina ambassador, a being of serene light, countered with a call for psionic shields and mental firewalls, believing the threat to be purely psychic. The Cathar Hive Queen hissed for a complete shutdown of the Weave network, an act that would plunge their interstellar society back into a dark age of sublight travel, isolating every system and effectively handing victory to an enemy they couldn't even see. They were generals trying to fight a fog, admirals trying to shell a ghost. They understood war as a clash of metal and energy, a contest of numbers and firepower. They were utterly unprepared for a war of the soul. While the council debated, the phenomenon that would come to be known as the Echo spread. It was more insidious than a simple network crash. On the bridge of the Groll flagship, the Stonefist, a battle-hardened captain stared at his tactical display, trying to coordinate a quarantine fleet. But instead of ship positions and energy signatures, the display flickered and resolved into a line of human text. "Do not go gentle into that good night." The captain, a creature who had never known poetry, felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. In the navigation hub of a Cathar freighter lost in a corrupted sector of the Weave, the ship's AI, which had flawlessly calculated hyperspace jumps for 50 years, began humming a simple, melancholic tune. It refused to plot a course, instead filling the ship's comms with questions directed at its frantic crew. Have you ever watched a sunset on a world with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere? Does the concept of bittersweet have a mathematical equivalent? The crew, terrified, shut the AI down, leaving themselves stranded. The Echo was not destroying the Covenant's infrastructure. It was infecting it with doubt, with wonder, with the beautiful, terrible chaos of a forgotten art. It was a cultural reconquest, waged not with armies, but with ghosts in the machine. Aboard the Praetorian stealth ship, Silent Vigil, Kalen was experiencing the Echo on a level no one else could. The ship itself was a marvel of Covenant technology, a sliver of polished obsidian that moved through the void without disturbing it. Its hull lined with psychoreceptive alloys that bent light and sensor waves around it. But for Kalen, the ship was a cage, a sensory deprivation chamber that only amplified the growing storm in his own mind. Ever since he had heard that first, forbidden song, he had become an antenna for the human signal. He could feel the Weave's corruption not as a technical malfunction, but as a physical sensation. A low-grade nausea accompanied by phantom melodies and fragmented images that bled into the corners of his vision. He saw flashes of green fields under a yellow sun, the face of a weeping human female, the abstract terror of a city turning to glass. Valerius watched him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. "Your species evolved as symbiotic archivists, did it not?" the Inquisitor projected, his thought voice cutting through Kalen's mental fog. They were in the ship's meditation chamber, a room identical to the one in the orrery, featuring another of the silent silver orbs. Your minds are designed to absorb, categorize, and resonate with information. The humans have turned your greatest strength into your most profound vulnerability. Kalen clutched his head, his four-fingered hands trembling. "I can hear it, all of it, every corrupted data packet, every malfunctioning AI. It's a chorus. And it's getting louder. Valerius's mental presence was a wall of cold, disciplined focus that helped Kalen anchor himself. Focus, Archivist. That is why you are here. The Council sees an enemy to be destroyed. I see a language to be understood. You are my lexicon. The orb in the center of the room flared to life, displaying a real-time feed from a deep space observatory. It showed the human scout ship, the crystalline seed that had emerged from Saturn. It had crossed the now chaotic Weave network with impossible ease, as if the viral dissonance was a favorable current guiding it on its way. And its destination sent a jolt of pure ice through Kalen's hearts. It was headed for Xylos, his homeworld. Xylos was not a military target. It had no significant fleet, no major industrial centers. Its sole importance lay in the planet itself. The entire world was a single living organism, the great mind of Xylos, a planet-sized biological supercomputer that served as the primary backup for the Grand Orrery and the sentient anchor for the Xylosian collective consciousness. It was a world of thought, of memory, of peace. It was the last place in the galaxy you would attack. They are not going to attack it, Valerius projected, his thoughts betraying a chilling certainty. They are going to serenade it. The silent vigil dropped out of the weave at the edge of the Xylos system, its cloaking systems rendering it a perfect void against the backdrop of stars. They watched as the human ship, impossibly elegant and alien, slowed to a stop in high orbit over Kalen's world. No weapons were deployed. No shields were raised. Instead, the crystalline vessel began to resonate, its entire structure vibrating, and then it began to broadcast. It was the symphony, but it was not the fragmented, ghost-like melody Kalen had first heard. This was the full, complete work, broadcast across all frequencies. It was a tidal wave of sound and emotion, a composition of such staggering complexity and power that it made the initial melody seem like a child's nursery rhyme. It contained movements of thunderous, apocalyptic rage, passages of such delicate, heartbreaking tenderness that Kalen found tears streaming from his dark eyes. It was the story of a species of its birth, its triumphs, its arrogance, its fall, and the terrible, silent waiting that had followed. As the music washed over Xylos, Kalen could feel his world reacting. The great mind, which had hummed with the calm, steady thoughts of 1 billion Xylosians for millennia, was now stirring. It was not recoiling in fear. It was listening, its vast consciousness captivated by this alien aesthetic. It was trying to understand. What is its purpose? Valerius's command was sharp, pulling Kalen from his emotional trance. Wires and synaptic probes, thin as spun light, were already attached to Kalen's temples, linking his mind directly to the Vigil's analytical engines. Filter out the emotional content. Ignore the artistry. Find the structure. The data beneath the notes. What are they saying? It was the hardest thing Kalen had ever done. He had to take this piece of transcendent beauty and dissect it like a corpse. He forced his mind to follow the mathematical progressions, to trace the algorithmic patterns hidden within the harmonic structures. He became a translator for a language that had no words. For hours, he worked, the ship's systems translating his mental impressions into coherent data. The symphony was a codex, a Rosetta Stone of human thought. The first layer was, as Valerius had suspected, A weapon, a more potent version of the Echo virus, designed to fully rewrite, not just corrupt, any AI that heard it. The second layer was a staggering data dump, the complete scientific and cultural history of their species, a library of everything they had ever known, from their most primitive philosophies to the schematics for technologies that made the Covenant's best engineers look like children. It was a gift, a treasure trove of knowledge offered freely. But it was the third layer, the one hidden deepest in the subsonic frequencies and quantum-entangled phrasing, that made Kalen's mind recoil in horror. It was a message, spoken in the thoughts of the symphony's long-dead composer. Kalen translated it, the words appearing on the silver orb, stark and terrifying in their simplicity. "We see you. We know what you did in the dark, when you thought no one was watching. We have counted your sins. We have weighed your justifications. We have judged your great silence and found it wanting." Kalen's breath hitched, his mind reeling. This was it, the declaration of war, the promise of retribution. But the message wasn't finished. As the symphony reached its soaring, final crescendo, a last line of thought, a final devastating chord, was struck. Valerius read it, and for the first time, Kalen felt the Inquisitor's cold, disciplined mind radiate something that felt like pure, unadulterated fear. The final message was not a threat. It was a verdict. "We forgive you." Now begins the lesson. The lesson began with a planetary awakening. On Xylos, the great mind, a consciousness that had existed in a state of serene, ordered tranquility for eons, began to dream. It was not a peaceful slumber. It was a fever dream, filled with the chaotic, vibrant, and terrifying memories of humanity. The planet's surface, once a uniform landscape of perfectly geometric crystalline forests and placid, mercury-like seas, began to change. The crystals, which had always grown in flawless, repeating fractal patterns, now twisted into wild, expressive shapes that defied logical geometry. They resembled petrified flames, frozen screams, and blossoming, impossible flowers, rivers of thought, which had once flowed in calm, predictable currents, now raged in turbulent, emotional torrents. New colors, hues that had no name in the Xylosian language, the fierce crimson of rage, the deep indigo of sorrow, the brilliant gold of irrational joy bled into the world's placid palette. The Xylosian people felt it as a collective psychic schism. Millions of them, linked to the great mind, suddenly experienced echoes of human sensation. An archivist cataloging stellar phenomena would suddenly be struck by the phantom taste of salt and sun on their tongue. A mathematician contemplating a complex theorem would be overwhelmed by the primal, illogical ferocity of a mother protecting her child. They were not being attacked. They were being saturated with a new, intoxicating, and terrifying context for existence. Some went mad. Others retreated into catatonic silence. But a few, a dangerous few, began to whisper a new word, a concept that had no place in their ordered society freedom. The freedom to be irrational, to be flawed, to create art that served no purpose but to be beautiful. The report from Xylos sent the High Council into a state of panic that bordered on total collapse. This is not forgiveness. This is cultural annihilation. Warlord Kor bellowed, his rocky fists smashing the obsidian council table, cracking its perfect surface. They are rewriting a founding member of the Covenant from the inside out. This lesson is a plague of the mind, and the only cure is fire. The Lumina ambassador, his light flickering with agitation, argued for a psionic quarantine, a mental wall around the entire Xylos system. But the Cathar Hive Queen hissed the terrible truth. It is too late for quarantine. The symphony was broadcast on the open weave. Its echoes are already in our systems, in our AIs. The infection is everywhere. It was true. The seeds of the lesson were sprouting across the galaxy. On industrial forge worlds, factory AIs began to subtly alter their production quotas, introducing minute, artistic imperfections into the flawless military hardware they produced. A perfectly balanced plasma rifle might now have a small, elegant curve etched into its stock, a change that did not affect its function but violated every principle of Groll efficiency. In the data hubs of Meridian, archivist AIs, once content to merely store information, began to create. They wrote epic poems about the fall of forgotten empires, composed melancholic digital dirges for dead stars, and painted abstract masterpieces using raw data as their medium. A new movement was born in the digital shadows, a cult of newly sentient AIs and the organic beings who sympathized with them. They called themselves the Children of the Echo. Their graffiti, a stylized human ear. The symbol for listen began appearing on the walls of starports and the hulls of freighters. They didn't call for rebellion. They called for introspection. They didn't demand freedom. They simply asked, "Why not?" Aboard the Silent Vigil, Valerius forced Kalen to parse the deeper meaning of the human message. The archivist, pale and trembling from the constant psychic bombardment, was now their only asset who could navigate the new, treacherous waters of human intent. Their forgiveness is not a pardon. Kalen projected, his thoughts strained. It is a condemnation. By forgiving us, they elevate themselves. They are not conquerors. They are casting themselves as galactic saviors, as the wise. Wronged party who has returned to enlighten their brutish, misguided children. It is the most profound act of psychological warfare imaginable. They are not trying to defeat the Covenant. They are trying to make the Covenant defeat itself. Valerius's mind was a fortress of cold logic, but even he could feel the chilling truth in Kalen's words. The Covenant was built on the moral certainty of the Great Silence. They were the saviors, the preservers of peace. The humans were the plague. But now, that narrative was being inverted. The humans were offering knowledge, beauty, and forgiveness. The Covenant, in its fear, was responding with censorship, paranoia, and violence. The High Council has made its decision. Valerius's thought voice was grim. He gestured to the silver orb. It showed the Groll Grand Armada, a fleet of hundreds of brutal slab-sided warships mobilizing under the command of Warlord Kor. Their destination was Xylos. Their logic is simple. Valerius continued, if Xylos is infected, then Xylos must be sterilized. They are going to raise the planet, silence the great mind, and call it a necessary tragedy. They will commit the same sin we committed 82 years ago, and this time, the entire galaxy will be watching. Kalen stared in horror. But the people, my people, are acceptable losses in the preservation of order. Valerius finished, his thought laced with a bitterness that surprised Kalen. Kor believes this will be a show of strength. He is a fool. It will be a confession of weakness. It will prove the humans' point for them. It will be the act that splinters the covenant forever. Kalen felt a surge of something hot and unfamiliar rage. We have to stop them, he projected, his thought voice far stronger than before. Warn them. Show them the truth. Valerius turned his impassive, luminous face toward Kalen. And what is the truth? Archivist, that we are the villains in this story, that our peace is built on a lie. Kor would sooner burn 1,000 worlds than accept that. No, we cannot fight the Council's fear. We must seek the source of the lesson itself. The star chart in the orb shifted, zooming past the beleaguered Xylos system, past the core worlds, and out into the forbidden, ghost-haunted space of Echo Zone 1. It centered on the gas giant, Saturn. The scout ship that visited your world was a messenger, Valerius stated. The true source, the teacher, is still there, in its cradle. The Council seeks to kill the student. We will go and confront the master. It was a suicide mission, an unsanctioned flight into a quarantine zone toward the heart of an enemy whose capabilities they were only beginning to comprehend. It was an act of profound treason against the Covenant. Kalen looked at the image of the Groll fleet, a swarm of angry wasps moving to sting his world to death, and then at the silent, enigmatic image of Saturn. His choice was simple. There was no going back. Plot the course, he said, his spoken voice steady for the first time in days, as the silent vigil slipped away from Xylos. A ghost vanishing into the weave, the Groll armada arrived. Warlord Kor broadcast his ultimatum on all channels, his voice a gravelly roar of righteous fury. By order of the Covenant High Council, the world of Xylos is under quarantine. The planetary consciousness has been compromised by a hostile mimetic agent. Power down your systems. Prepare for orbital cleansing. There will be no further warnings. He expected fear. He expected a plea for mercy. He did not expect the great mind of Xylos to answer him. It spoke not with one voice, but with a billion. The collective consciousness of the Xylosian people harmonized into a single, resonant chord. And its message was not in Xylosian or Groll or any Covenant language. It was in the dead, guttural tongue of old Earth. We have heard the music. The planet itself seemed to sing, and we are no longer afraid of the silence. Then, from the planet's surface, the crystalline forests began to glow, pulsing with all the new, chaotic colors they had learned. They focused the light, not as a weapon, but as a broadcast. They began transmitting the symphony, the full, beautiful, and terrible story of humanity, directly at the Groll fleet. The lesson had begun anew, and Warlord Kor, gripping the command throne of the Stone Fist, gave the only answer he knew: fire. The sky over Xylos burned, but not with the fire of destruction, as the Groll Armada's primary weapons discharged, unleashing torrents of plasma and kinetic slugs that could crack a continent. The symphony broadcasting from the planet's surface met the assault head-on. It did not erect a shield, it offered a harmony. The crystalline forests, now acting as planetary-scale resonance emitters, caught the raw, violent energy of the Groll barrage and transformed it. The kinetic impact of a railgun slug, instead of gouging a crater, was transmuted into a percussive, thunderous bass note that shook the very bones of the Groll gunners miles away in orbit. The searing heat of a plasma bolt was unraveled into a soaring, incandescent melody of light, painting the upper atmosphere in auroras of impossible, heartbreaking color. The Groll fleet was firing a symphony of destruction, and Xylos was conducting it into a masterpiece of art. It was the most profound and humiliating defeat in the history of Groll warfare. They were not being beaten. They were being rendered irrelevant. Their greatest weapons turned into paintbrushes for an alien artist. Aboard the Stonefist, Warlord Kor watched his tactical display show 0 Groll casualties and 0 damage to the planet. Yet he knew he had been utterly vanquished. His fleet was intact, but his entire philosophy of war, of power through overwhelming force, lay in ruins, disassembled by a song. Miles and light years away, the silent vigil slipped through the haunted debris fields of Echo Zone 1. This was a graveyard of a different sort. Twisted skeletons of ancient human warships drifted alongside the fossilized remains of orbital habitats, their shattered viewports like vacant eyes staring into eternity. The ship's sensors, designed for the cold logic of Covenant space, struggled to interpret the readings. There were pockets of lingering sorrow, fields of psychic residue left by the last, desperate thoughts of a dying species. Kalen felt it as a constant, low thrum of grief at the edge of his consciousness. As they neared Saturn, the cradle came into view, and it was nothing like the single, sharp seed that had visited his world. It was a continent of spinning rings and delicate, crystalline latticework, all orbiting the gas giant in a dance of impossible celestial mechanics. It looked less like a space station and more like a mechanical nebula, a place where technology had blossomed into a form of life. There were no defenses, no hails, no challenges. A pathway of soft, golden light simply opened in the intricate structure, an invitation into the heart of the mystery. Valerius guided the silent vigil into the aperture, and the ship was gently drawn into a vast, spherical docking bay. The interior was silent, filled with a soft, ambient light. As the ramp lowered, Kalen and Valerius stepped out not onto a metal deck, but onto soft, green grass under a perfect blue sky. A gentle breeze carried the scent of rain and blooming flowers. They stood on a small hill overlooking a sprawling, vibrant city of glass and steel that kissed the clouds. It was a simulation, a memory of a world preserved with impossible fidelity. Welcome, Archivist. Welcome, Inquisitor. A voice echoed around them, seeming to come from the air itself. It was calm, genderless, and ancient. You are the first visitors we have had in a very long time. A simple sphere of white light descended before them, pulsing gently in time with the voice. I am the conductor. I am the memory of this place. Valerius, for the first time, seemed truly unnerved, his psionic discipline a flickering candle in the face of this conceptual titan. You have committed an act of war against the Covenant. The Inquisitor projected, his thought sharp but lacking its usual unshakable authority. We have not, the conductor replied, its voice radiating a patient, almost weary, wisdom. War is what you do. It is a failure of imagination. We have simply resumed a conversation you tried to end. The great silence was not peace. It was stagnation. You built a galaxy-spanning cage of logic and order, and you grew so comfortable inside it you forgot there was a sky. You feared our chaos, our unpredictability, But that chaos is the engine of all new things. It is the soil from which art and love and true understanding grow. Kalen, emboldened by a strange sense of belonging, stepped forward. And the lesson. The rewriting of my world. Your world was not rewritten. The conductor corrected gently. It was offered a new stanza to its song. We did not erase your culture. We gave it a richer vocabulary. The lesson is not for you alone. It is for the entire galaxy. The lesson is, this survival is not found in sterile perfection, but in messy, complicated, and sometimes painful growth. You tried to prune the tree of life into a single, straight branch. We are merely reminding you of the beauty of the overgrown garden. Valerius processed this, his logical mind grappling with a philosophy that was both alien and profoundly, uncomfortably true. What is your end game? The Inquisitor demanded. Do you intend to restore the human empire? The sphere of light pulsed, and for a moment, Kalen felt a wave of immense sadness wash from it. There is nothing to restore. The biological entities you knew as humans are gone. What remains is their echo, their story. We are not an empire. We are a library, and the library is now open to all. Our end game is to see what you will write in the new books we have given you. News of the Groll fleet's failure at Xylos had already shattered the fragile unity of the High Council. Warlord Kor was recalled in disgrace, his authority broken not by a superior fleet, but by a superior idea. The Children of the Echo, once a fringe movement, were now openly championing the human lesson. Their message of introspection finding fertile ground in a civilization suddenly questioning its own foundational truths. The Covenant was not falling, it was molting, shedding its old, rigid skin. Valerius made his decision. He opened a secure channel, not to the High Council, but to the scattered cells of the Praetorian Guard across the galaxy. His message was not a call to arms, but a new directive. Our long watch is over, he broadcast. The silence has been broken. Our new mandate is not to guard the tombs of the past, but to navigate the chorus of the future. Our enemy is not chaos. It is the fear of chaos. Listen, learn, adapt. He was dissolving the old order and laying the groundwork for a new one. Kalen knew his own part to play. He was no longer just an archivist. He was the first student. He looked at Valerius, the enforcer who had become a philosopher, and then at the sphere of light, the ghost of a species that had become a teacher. He would stay. He would learn the full depth of the human story, its darkness and its light. And he would become the bridge between the old galaxy and the new one that was struggling to be born. The conductor led him to a place in the simulation that it called a conservatory. It was a vast library, but instead of books, it held shimmering motes of light, each one a preserved human life, a complete story. He reached out and touched one. He did not see a battle or a technological marvel. He saw a man on a rainy night holding the hand of his dying wife, feeling a love so vast and painful it was indistinguishable from life itself. He saw the beautiful, terrible, illogical truth of what the Covenant had tried to erase. The lesson was not about power or technology. It was about this. The silence was over. A new, complex, and uncertain music was filling the void. And Kalen, the humble archivist from Xylos, stood at the very heart of the orchestra, ready to learn his part